despite what it says on this phone, there are good people who are rowing together. Not perfect people, not flawless people, but folks, with a great deep sense of fire in their belly to serve. And I'm not asking for anything of your viewers other than to have some hope, because from my perspective, I get to see imperfect people who care deeply about this Commonwealth working together.
Welcome to Sunrise and Beyond, the podcast from Sunrise Children's Services. Beyond the headlines are the people, ideas, and conversations shaping the future of child welfare. And now, one of Kentucky's most respected voices for children, your host, Dr. Terry Brooks.
Welcome to Sunrise and Beyond, the brand new podcast series brought to you by Sunrise Children's Services. I'm your host for this series, Terry Brooks. So what is this series about anyway? It was 1869. 1869. That's the year when Sunrise President Dale Suttles reminds us that Jif peanut butter, waffle irons, and the vacuum cleaner were invented. It's also the year that Sunrise Children's Services was invented. In 1869, Sunrise Services began to serve fractured and broken families. And that's exactly what we continue to do 157 years later. So this podcast is part of the Sunrise Ministry. Our intent is to spotlight Kentuckians, be they elected officials, pastors or principals, frontline workers or grandmas, pediatricians and business leaders who are stepping up for children in a faith-based way. There cannot be a more appropriate opening to Sunrise and Beyond than today's episode, when I'm joined by President Suttles and Attorney General Russell Coleman on this inaugural podcast. So General Coleman and President Suttles, welcome to Sunrise and Beyond.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brooks. Let me literally pull up here to the table. We jokingly said you're setting the bar pretty low here with your inaugural episode, but I'm honored to spend time with someone that has given his entire adult life to serving kids. So I'm honored to join you.
Thanks. Dale, you want to weigh in on this podcast is possible only because of your vision. You want to talk just a little bit as we look ahead, what you hope to see happening?
Well, this is really exciting. The first podcast that Sunrise is putting out there, and to have a guest like A.G. Coleman, we're just so grateful that you've done that. Terry, welcome aboard. You've been with us a few months now, and I know we're going to do some profound and dynamic things. Appreciate you as a brother of Christ, and someone who loves and wants to do the very best for Kentucky's children. So I'm excited about the future and excited about this podcast.
Great. Well, our producers have told us that they have the shot clock running. So you're going to find a complete bio of Attorney General Coleman in our show notes, but just very briefly to set the stage. General Coleman has spent 2 decades in public service. Most recently, before his election as the 52nd Attorney General in Kentucky, he had been nominated by President Trump and confirmed unanimously by the Senate as the U.S. Attorney General for Western Kentucky. Prior to that, he was both a private attorney and an FBI agent. A native of Western Kentucky, Russell is a husband to Ashley, and I believe a proud dad for 3 little Colemans, if I've got those numbers right.
Yes.
So, Russell, you and I talked off camera that you and I first began talking when you were leading some juvenile justice reform work. We talked to you during the campaign. We talked to you after your election. And again, it is not random that we wanted to start this series with you. I want to open because Sunrise is very upfront that we want to lead like Jesus. We want a Christian attitude and perspective to animate everything that goes on at Sunrise. When I think about you as a dad, as a husband, but as a public servant, You clearly are a person guided by faith. And I'd like to just invite you to spend a few minutes talking about how that faith equation plays out on an everyday basis on a Monday in Frankfurt. What's it mean for you being a believer in Jesus?
Well, what an extraordinary compliment. Let me open by welcoming your viewers, welcoming you to the Office of the Attorney General, what we call our tabernacle office. We are not in the state capitol. Your viewers won't know that. We are in an office building in Frankfurt. I call it our tabernacle phase. Our state capitol was closed for 4 to 5 years, knock on wood, on the shorter end of the spectrum. And so I'm the first Attorney General since 1910 to not be sweating through my suit in that office. And I say that was part of the problem, sweating through the suit. That the HVAC was a bit dated in the state capitol. So hopefully we'll be able to welcome guests there soon. I do regret that our young people are not able to go through that inspirational building, which had such an impact on me when I was in fourth grade. I am as much as a church as a hospital. I notwithstanding your kind words, I am a broken, sinful man that is saved by the grace of Christ. Every day I have a reset. I rely on God's grace because I try to figure it out as a dad and fail, and figure it out as a husband and make mistakes. So I want to lead with I approach this out of a deficit. The deficit that played such a role in making faith just central to me getting through the day, me being able to serve in these roles. Since I was a kid, this notion of calling is I don't do discernment. Discernment's hard. We'll put it that way. I don't hear an audible voice or see that flaming finger on the wall. But when I was in second grade, I came across these books in second grade in Davis County, then in rural Davis County, these books in our elementary school. And they were old beat up black and white books. And while I should have been looking at the Berenstain Bears stuff, I strayed over to the older kids section. And these had FBI agents. These had Tommy guns and fedoras and looked like 1930s era gangster vehicles. And I knew I wanted to do that when I grew up. And I went home and told my parents, and I might as well have said I wanted to be an astronaut. They kind of patted me on the head. We didn't know FBI agents. We didn't know lawyers growing up. My dad worked in factories. We moved around Western Kentucky. But as I grew older, that calling was present. I knew I wanted to do that when I grew up. And as I grew older, it was less about the imagery, the cool stuff, although you have plenty of cool toys in law enforcement. It was more about the mission of law enforcement, to protect. You take the aperture, the role in our families, and you expand that out to your community, to the Commonwealth, to the nation. That's what we do in law enforcement. It's a lot like being a parent. And God allowed me the opportunity to be an FBI special agent. The proudest day professionally of my life, as much as I've been privileged to do other things. And thank you for the kind words on the front end as to the opportunities I've been provided. But when I stood on that stage at Quantico and had that tiny little piece of brass that was my shield, speaking, I was fortunate to be in my academy graduating class at the FBI Academy, and looked out on my family. That was the proudest day. I thought I had arrived where God had all of my experiences, what I did right. I thought I was there. And we make plans and God laughs. Yeah. And so you asked me about faith, and we make plans and God laughs because I did that job for a while. I was blessed to be a hostage negotiator. I had a chance to go to Iraq with the U.S. military. I served with some amazing men and women. We brought a kidnapped kid home. I was so blessed to get to do that job until I couldn't do the job anymore, until my legs stopped working, until a small pain in one leg day one. 7 days later, I had another agent have to carry me to the car to go to the emergency department with my wife because my legs didn't work anymore. I lost everything below the waist. And you never want to be the interesting one in a hospital. That's never a good thing.
And I was a young man in my early 30s. I had a young wife in her 20s. I had
You were
a
a
toddler.
runner, right?
I was a runner. That was cathartic for me.
Yeah.
I used to run in the worst weather when it was raining and snowing, and friends would say, "Why are you running?" And my answer, and I didn't know, was a bit prescient. My answer was, because I can. Well, until I couldn't. And I've not been able to run for almost 20 years now. And faith became, for me, less routinized. I was a baptized believer, but it was going to church on Sunday. It was sitting in the pew. It was routinized. It was part of the battle rhythm of the week. To when you are flat on your back and you don't know how you're going to protect your own family, or what happens if your child runs out in the road. I was a protector until I wasn't. And C.S. Lewis, the Bible, and a book on Theodore Roosevelt were on that bedside table. And faith was driven from something that was not a box to be checked, but something that was routinized, to something that I had a need to rely on every day.
Yeah. Dale, you have worked hard building an organization that is very Jesus-centric, but how does that make you feel to hear a prominent elected public official talk about how he listens to the Lord?
You don't hear that very often, do you?
No, you don't.
And what an amazing story. And several things strike me as I'm listening to. And again, what a wonderful testimony. But, you don't have it all figured out. You just by faith, just by being the hands and feet, just by quiet moments, you just try to do what you can do. Being the dad in the world that we're in, the world at Sunrise, the world that you're certainly in, and with all the opioid stuff, boy, do we need dads who will be quiet and listen and sit still and do some of the things you're going to do. We don't have enough dads. Okay. We don't have enough dads loving their kids the way you've loved your kids, and thinking about, as my son crosses the street, who's going to get them, and relying upon the strength of Jesus Christ. That is a wonderful story. I think it's where we want to push everything and challenge our young men out there to stop, listen, no, you don't have to be perfect. And the hands and feet of Jesus will lead you. So thank you for giving that testimony. Love it.
Talk about listening to voices. Renner, Kendall, and Carson Brooks, the Brooks teenage grandchildren, I don't want to say they get tired of it. They have seen you stand behind a podium with a telephone and talking about that as a dangerous weapon. So I'm going to reverse this because we've got enough to cover that this needs to be a Netflix series. But I want to make sure we hit a couple top four things.
Well, I filibustered a little bit on your first question, so admittedly so.
That's okay. So if my information is correct, middle of August is a pretty big moment when it comes to protecting kids and social media. No one, not just in the Commonwealth, but I would suggest nationally, you are the leading voice when it comes to the dangers at hand and what you're trying to do to mitigate it. So I'm going to be quiet and just let you riff a little bit. First of all, make sure our viewers know the dangers there. But what are you, as Attorney General for the Commonwealth, doing to stop that? Because that is a pandemic. It may not be physiological, but it's a pandemic nonetheless.
The opioid fight of my time in this job, the opioid fight now involves this. And why do I say that? Because attorneys general, those who served in my role 20 years ago, the battle, and that's not to say that we're still not fighting the opioid battle. We are, one at a time, prevention, and look forward to hopefully talking about that, going after those that bring the poison here. But the reality is, this is the most dangerous item in your home. Those that are listening and that aren't watching this, I'm waving around as you described, waving around my phone. And why do I say that? Because we can go to sleep at night, and in our homes, we can turn on the ADT system. We can take the pistol out and put it on our bedside if we feel better. That way we can lock all our doors. But if this device, if our kids are on this, they are opening our homes up, your grandkids, not just to Jefferson County, they're opening our homes up to the world. And we as parents, and I fall on this sword, we have overprotected in the real world, and we have underprotected in the virtual world that so many of our kids live in. And
Great
Dale,
way to put it.
you see how this manifests itself with some of the broken kids and broken families
No
that
doubt.
you are tending to.
No doubt. Children who are depressed, children that want to be a certain way based upon an image that they see on the phone, being led a certain way, being taught to think a certain way. It's almost brainwashing. My wife and I, we laugh sometimes because she says I was old fashioned back in '95 when Clinton was talking about the internet highway, and I said, "Sounds good. I don't think we can handle it." and then sure enough, the other night she said, "You might have been right." There's a lot of brokenness that comes from cell phone usage, and we know that the handiness of it, and we know the tools that it possesses for us. But boy, if we don't get a handle on it, we're going to lose not a generation, 2 generations.
Oh, I'm sometimes accused of being a bit of a Luddite, kind of a knuckle dragger when it comes to technology. But I will tell you this: in law enforcement, you go to where the threats are. You go to where the threats are. And when I make a statement like this cell phone, this innocuous, convenient technology is as important as the opioid battle. When we lost over 1,000 Kentuckians last year, 1,400 the year before, there are families who are grieving the loss still, either of family members who are in addiction or because of addiction. That's not a throwaway line at a podium. I say that because we're putting our money where our mouth is. I'm sitting here rather, the same place I stood behind the podium when I announced that Kentucky was the second state in the United States to sue Roblox. What is Roblox? It's this innocuous game, cartoonish, that our kids play, right? That your grandkids hopefully play less of now. The reality is this is a platform with 320 million users last month. It is ubiquitous. Yes. Not a word I use a lot. It's ubiquitous. Yeah. Parents, grandparents, you know what this is. And I was in a room with a bunch of attorneys general some months ago, and we were talking about this threat. And one of them, who had been a district attorney, great mom, said, "Oh, Roblox, that's the safe one, isn't it?" It is. Let's just put it in terms that all three of us can understand. If we were with our kids, our grandkids on the playground, and we saw adults that we didn't know crawling around, playing, swinging on the jungle gym with our kids, would we just walk the other way, or would we intercede? That is exactly what's happening on Roblox. That is a absolute playground for predators. That's just one example. And it's an example of me taking, and the need in this office to take limited resources and dive into social media battles. I never expected this to be the exigent threat. You go to where the threat is.
And that's become really the drumbeat in many ways of what you're championing, isn't it?
It is the driver, and it is TikTok, and it's TikTok because it's the algorithm that's targeting our kids. This is not the issue in DC as to who owns this platform. It is the fact that with our young women that search for an innocuous term like diet or healthy eating, and they're fed the impossible images of skinny girls that lead them to suicidal ideation, eating disorder, or something that concerns me as the father of I have 2 girls and a son. The ubiquity of pornography on this. You want to talk about objectifying women? That our young boys their views of women are from this thing in their pocket, this dark stuff that takes them down a view of women that will be unpacking the devastation from that, and for the rest of our time in these roles as parents. So this is where the threat is. Just to bookend this, we could spend our time together discussing this. If there's one takeaway from our entire time together, it is for parents to know that I'm guilty of this. We have overprotected out there, and we are underprotecting here. If folks have not read the Jonathan Haidt book, Anxious Generation, you talk about losing a generation. Anxious Generation. I don't give a lot of homework usually on podcasts, and your viewers are busy.
You're giving it.
If you're a parent, if you're a policymaker, if you're a grandparent, you care about kids, read Anxious Generation. This is a
a professor that views the world maybe through a very different lens at NYU, but the data he brings, the stories will, as my grandfather would say, would curl your hair in terms of being concerned.
Well, I, for one, appreciate the imagination and commitment that you're giving to an issue that is, sometimes I think it's gets too little attention, and sometimes I think people think it's too big of an issue to tackle. Great. You are. So I want to reverse the sequence because we want to get to the opioid fight. But Dale, you have been somebody who has worked with children in a variety of capacities for a long time. And I'd like you to open by reflecting on opioids and drugs and kids and families. Just what have you seen? And then I want to pivot those observations and let you describe the work that you're doing with the Opioid Commission and other efforts. So as you look back, track it for us. What's happening and what has happened to kids because of the opioid epidemic?
Well, my word would be carnage. I mean, it is just simply devastation where it hits. And, it's everywhere. I mean, it's we tend to look at Eastern Kentucky and places in Eastern Kentucky, Harlan and Hazard and so on, Manchester, they've all been hit hard. Literally, communities have been overtaken. And, just like the phone issue, this is a destruction of families. Men leave their homes. Grandparents end up with children. That's why we have 60,000 kids that woke up this morning to kinship care because they have grandmother and grandfather raising them. It's a devastation that is unmatched. I think back in the late 60s, I was told that folks used to be very scared of the United States being taken over by a nuclear attack. It's been taken over from the inside. And now we have a multitude of enemies. We have the opioid. We have issues with our technologies and so on. But it's just devastating to our families. And I'm so proud of the work of the AG to look at this and to go after it because it is a destroyer of families.
It's a great point that it's hard to remember when the Cold War seemed simple compared to what we're doing now.
Absolutely.
So, General Coleman, I want to let you have some margin here to riff a little bit. I want to make
Be careful.
Sure, well,
Be careful
I know,
there.
Well, I got the shot clock on here. I want to especially, along with talking about what you're doing, what I think you do as well as anybody is listen to the voices of young people themselves. I can remember spending an entire afternoon with you. We had gathered a group of young people from all over Kentucky, and you kept asking the same question, which is what behavior in your hometown leads to opioid addiction? What impressed me was you didn't have staff. You did have staff there, but it wasn't staff doing it. It was Attorney General Russell Coleman sitting for hours listening. So I know a lot of your prevention work is youth voice, but talk about the big picture and then especially the role that how young people are actually informing your strategy and decisions.
Well, let me say that it's rare that I'd quote Lyndon Johnson, but so much of leadership, in my view, and it's ironic that I'm on a podcast and talking, but listen to Dale taking notes. So much of leadership needs to be more listening than talking, and I recognize that in terms of engaging kids, trying to maximize efficacy, that and I'm humbled by my own kids. I realize that I need to do a lot more listening than talking. Let me go back to one point that I want to riff off of your comment, and that this drug crisis that we face, it is not that neighborhood or that you reference Eastern Kentucky. It's not Appalachia's problem, or it's not that part of my hometown or even that family. It is us. And it is impossible for me to speak to a group, chamber, law enforcement officers, teachers, a group at church, that someone is not impacted by the drug epidemic. And let me also correct, I would say we do not have an opioid crisis in this Commonwealth or in this country. We have a drug crisis. And I say that
That's
because
a great point.
we have evolved, and we have to, while we have an opioid commission and there are reasons then, and there's some statutes that govern how that money is spent, stepping away from that in broader strokes, we have a drug crisis. And I don't want us to get pigeonholed, because back in the day, Eastern Kentucky had an opioid problem. Western Kentucky, where I was United States Attorney, had a methamphetamine problem. You almost had a dividing line.
Yep.
It was I-65. If you were west of there, you had meth. You had east of there, you had pills, and Louisville was a dividing line.
Both.
It is.
Louisville had both.
We were drowning in both. It's what you call a poly-drug environment. It is a no margin of error environment, is what it is. And that could apply to the phone, or it could apply to the drug crisis we're facing. It is a no margin of error.
Mistake, one pill.
We're raising kids, and you see this, Dale. You see this every day. We're raising kids in a no margin of error environment. When I was a kid, I made dumb decisions. I did some things that were probably reckless, but I don't know if I was ever walking the razor's edge to where one bad decision with a prefrontal cortex that was still developing could have killed me.
Yeah.
Maybe in a vehicle you go too fast, but we're talking about one pill can and is killing. So what are we doing to mitigate that? It takes the three-legged stool. It takes enforcement. We're in the Office of the Attorney General. We're a law enforcement agency. We are going after those that bring the poison into this Commonwealth. We are putting handcuffs on bad guys. We're still doing that. We have to do that. While at the same time, we have to treat those and try to bring those back from addiction. And finally, in Kentucky, we have more treatment beds per capita than any state in the nation. Now, it's our job to make sure those dollars are being spent with fidelity. We investigate healthcare fraud here. But the piece that we're failing, the leg of the stool where we as a state have failed, is on the prevention space. If we're living in an environment where a single decision and a single pill could kill my son or my daughter, or a funeral I attended last weekend of dear friends lost their son, a single decision, what are we doing to prevent? And so that is where it's the line that I want to quote Joseph speaking to his brothers as we close out Genesis, where he looks at his brothers and he says, what was meant for ill, God will use for good. So
Amen. What
was meant for ill, and I will wave around this phone again in terms of technology, we had to do more on the prevention space. And so we have it's probably the toughest agency to say in all of state government, and the most important agency to your kids outside of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. It is the Kentucky Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission. We just call it the Opioid Commission, or the Commission. It was set up by the legislature to distribute funds that we have clawed back in our lawsuit against opioid lawsuits, myriad, and some of my predecessors as well. Those companies that created the crisis, or they fueled the crisis, we have brought back about $1 billion with a B. Half of that money goes to cities and counties via formula to mitigate the opioid crisis. Half of it goes to this commission. Why is it so important? About $500 million important, with a mandate from the General Assembly to use those dollars to mitigate the drug crisis. And let's talk about stewardship, because that money is viewed as blood money. It's viewed as blood money for those that have had their families devastated. And so every one of those dollars that we spend, the commission, in reviewing grants, and that's the process by which we take grant requests from all over the Commonwealth. Not all good ideas come from Frankfurt. Not all good ideas come from the Golden Triangle. So it is very important that we get great ideas from communities all over the Commonwealth, and we have a commission. The commission is attached to the AG's office. The executive director of the commission, his name's Chris Evans. He really is the real Captain America. This is a gentleman that spent his whole career serving families. He ran the Drug Enforcement Administration at one point. He is my executive director. He runs our staff. But most of those, I appoint some, the governor and others appoint. So it is talk about R's and D's rowing together. They review these grant applications and they fund these programs. So for me, how do I step into that prevention space? It is not traditionally the role of the Attorney General to engage in drug prevention other than through direct law enforcement. But in this environment, I have to go to where the threats are. And when the threat is devouring our
families, like a voracious dragon out there. We sent Chris Evans, I sent him and a team to look across the country. I would tell you, gentlemen, I would stand on my head out there if I thought it would save lives. I want the team to find what's working in the prevention space. I know they're doing it well somewhere. We've never done it since the DARE days, right? We've not done it at scale. There was nothing going on at scale. They're great people in counties and various programs and what known as ASAP boards doing great work out there, but it was not at scale given the scale of the threat.
Absolutely.
The scale of the threat is enormous and it's growing. Yeah. So they brought a program back from Broward County, Florida called Better Without It. And here is where my skepticism had to take some work. And here's showing a little leg. Because this is a program, it's not me at the podium with the suit pounding that podium saying one pill can kill, which is true, and I still do that. But this is engaging with kids, listening to kids like you talked about, finding out what messages work and using technology, what was meant for ill, using that technology to put a positive message out there to say you're better off without it. That is where Coach Pope, that is partnering, first of all, with professional, with athletes, with UK, with U of L, with Western, Javon Hadley, Coach Pope staring at that camera, Trent Noah, great, really looking forward to him. Glad he's staying, looking forward to him this season from Harlan, has a real heart for this issue. Popping up on those screens, talking to a young person, and our target audience is age 13 to 26, saying, you want to play on that court? You want to wear this blue jersey or red jersey in your case? You're better without it. And that felt Pollyanna to me early on, except understanding the power of U of L, understanding the power of Big Blue, particularly in rural Kentucky. I want to be like that guy. Yep. I jokingly said earlier that if Richie Farmer would have sold toothpaste, my grandmother would have had cases of that growing up. The power, we're leveraging that. We're using student athletes and the 2.0 phase and partnering with your former agency, organization, KYA, and listening to kids and using those kids to talk to other kids, to come on that screen and say, I lost one example. I lost a loved one. How am I filling that hole? Well, I use equine, or I'm a bull rider, or I'm a race car driver, or hey, I'm an FFA. Filling that with a positive, filling that hole, that God-sized hole, filling that with something positive. And the data says that works. And we are spending a lot of blood money to see and to invest in that here in the Commonwealth. It's called Better Without It. We rolled this out at the UK U of L game last year. So this is a high profile effort. We've had a significant number of eyeballs on this across the Commonwealth. My comms director could tell me the number of distinct engagements we've seen. At the end of the day, we want to save lives. And this program I'm excited about. If I do one thing, leave one thing on the field as Attorney General, this may be the most important thing I do in this job.
That's great. So we're getting the cue that it's time to wrap this up. So I want to offer both of you all a little chance to do your own version of a benediction. We've talked about faith. We've talked about leadership. We've talked about kids. So Dale, I'm going to ask you to open, and then General, I'm going to ask you to conclude. So you set. We appreciate you being here in your busy schedule there, Mr. Suttles. And what's your takeaway sitting there, brother?
Well, I'm pumped. I'm ready. It's like I just had a speech at halftime. I'm ready to go out and beat U of L.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm ready to go. Listen, when you talk about some of these things, and especially the program you're talking about, taking it forth to our kids and our traumatized kids, broken kids, and having this message, and it is a message of hope, and replicate that with adults everywhere, with kids, peer to peer, kids to kids, getting excited about something that's got real teeth. So no, I'm just pumped, but I always am when I listen to the AGs.
Well, you're kind.
So General Coleman, because you've been so gracious, I'm not going to mention that it didn't matter if that was rolled out at the football game or the basketball game, the same team won.
That's a tough crowd.
But we appreciate you being here. And I'd like you to look at our listeners and viewers. What's a word of encouragement and inspiration, whether you're a lawmaker or whether you're a mom or a grandpa? What word do you have for them today, Russell?
Well, it's the most powerful word that I have, and it is hope.
it is very easy as a lawman, law enforcement officer, as a nonprofit leader, uh, as a dad. It's very easy to focus on the darkness. It's very easy to doom scroll on that phone on my drive home, or sitting in my office. It's very easy to focus on the darkness, the threats that are out there. What is the impact that technology is going to have on my kids in the economic sense, much less the predatory sense. It's very easy to focus on the darkness. But gentlemen, in this job, I get to see young men and young women and older men and older women who have a fire in their belly to provide hope, to serve, to protect these kids. I get to see fine people going into public service. Not all in law enforcement, teachers and nurses. And we talked about the University of Louisville Emergency Department earlier and how they save lives from homicide. I get to see amazing people who are willing to stare at that darkness and push back. And that is what you both have done throughout your career. It's what you've done one kid at a time and are doing at Sunrise. And I don't sit here having all the answers, and I don't sit here saying that I'm without flaw. I want to say that I am blessed to punch above my weight for a season as the Attorney General of this Commonwealth. It was very different than the role I thought God had lined up for me. But I'm so grateful to get to do this, to work with these young people, and to work with these public servants. There is cause for hope. Now that comes from a deeper place than those choosing public service. But I want to say, coming at this, there is such in this Commonwealth. There are. Let me briefly also say that if you looked at that phone, you would have a notion that R's and D's, Republicans and Democrats, are fighting constantly. We're punching each other in the mouth. Let me tell you, what we didn't talk about a minute ago is how we're engaging in violent crime mitigation and trying to save lives in Louisville. Louisville, the great town where in some neighborhoods we have kids that sleep, and we've talked about this, under their beds, or they sleep in bathtubs because that's the safest place in the house. My best partner in our prosecutors and law enforcement officers working in Louisville is the mayor of the city of Louisville, who, by the way, has a very different letter behind his name than I do, or the Commonwealth's attorney for Jefferson County, appointed by the governor, who I don't agree with 4x4 all the time, or the circuit court clerk, Dave Nicholson, who's loaning me space for $1 a year to be in downtown Louisville. Despite what it says on this phone, there are good people who are rowing together, not perfect people, not flawless people, but folks, with a great deep sense of fire in their belly to serve. And I'm not asking for anything of your viewers other than to have some hope, because from my perspective, I get to see imperfect people who care deeply about this Commonwealth working together. And that is a message that exists. That's not in some Pollyanna universe. That is not back in the 1950s in a Hardy Boys novel. That's happening right now, dealing with some of the toughest issues in our Commonwealth. Many of these big battles we're fighting across the country are with attorneys general from other states who have different letters behind their name than mine, R's and D's, rowing together. So I just want to say it is not as dark as it seems, but the challenges, the threats are out there. Yeah. And I encourage your viewers, your listeners, read the book. Read Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt.
Russell Coleman, your faith witness and your leadership give me hope, and we so appreciate you being here.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Grateful for you.
We want to thank you for joining us on this inaugural podcast of Sunrise and Beyond, brought to you by Sunrise Children's Ministries. We are the place that gives care and hope to hurting and fractured families and children across the Commonwealth.